And I don't think I have a seat on the rest of the week. So,
Gentlemen, New York Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, Section 102, provides that the New York State Gaming Commission shall consist of 7 members, appointed by the Governor by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. 6 members having been confirmed by the New York State Senate affords the Commission an ability to establish quorum and undertake action. This present meeting of the Commission is now called to order. Ms. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
John Crotty.
Here.
Mark Aaron.
Here.
Peter Machete.
Here.
John Paklemba.
Here.
Barry Sample.
Here.
Todd Snyder.
Here.
Ms. Secretary, please have the record reflect that a quorum of qualified members are present, thus enabling the transaction of business. Chairman Guerin?
Well, good morning, and thank you all very much for joining us here today. I want to begin by welcoming and recognizing our new commissioner. Peter Machete, welcome. Thank you for answering the call to public service.
Good to be here.
And we look forward to welcoming you, given your background and perspective. I'm sure you'll add immensely to our commission, so thank you. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize that former racing and wagering board chairman John Sabini suffered a stroke 10 days ago. So as we begin our duties here, we'd send our best wishes for a full and speedy recovery on all of our behalf. So why don't we get right to work here. We begin with the minutes of the commission meetings that were conducted on March 12th and 31st of 2014. They've been provided to members of the commission in advance, and I'd like to ask the members if there are any edits or corrections or amendments to the minutes. No. Madam Secretary, please let the record reflect that the minutes were adopted. Next in our agenda is the report of the Acting Executive Director, Rob.
Thanks. I'd like to discuss 2 issues of potential interest today. The first, to apprise you of the activities of the Gaming Facility Location Board, and second, to briefly discuss the upcoming Belmont Stakes Day. Since our last meeting on March 31st, there has been tremendous activity by the Gaming Facility Location Board regarding the request for applications. Following our meeting, the Gaming Facility Location Board met and adopted the request for applications, which was released that same day. An initial set of questions were due from prospective bidders by April 11th. In all, including subparts, the questions totaled approximately 475 and took some 90 pages to answer. The next major activity was the payment of an application fee by an individual, entity, consortium, or other party evincing interest in responding to the RFA. This fee was due on or before April 23rd. Overall, the Gaming Facility Location Board received 22 separate fees. The mandatory bidders conference followed. The purpose of this conference was twofold. One, as each potential applicant was required to be represented, it provided the first public facing of an applicant. It also allowed each potential applicant to ask questions in an open forum, with the prospect that questions from one group could spawn additional questions from another. Unfortunately, virtually no questions were asked. The media, however, did have an opportunity to interface with each of the bidder representatives. Another round of bidder questions followed, with approximately 125 questions and subparts received. The Gaming Facility Location Board met on May 12th to define the minimum capital investment necessary for each region. The minimums follow the application fee structure, differing within each region dependent upon location and in-region competition. The board also clarified some provisions of the RFA relative to minority and women-owned business enterprises. Each entity that filed an application fee had an opportunity to withdraw by a date certain and have their full fee refunded. Only 2 entities chose to withdraw, leaving 20 potential applications to be filed. The next item in the process is the filing of the applications themselves, and this is due no later than 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on June 30th. The other item I'd like to talk about today is the Belmont Stakes Day. Obviously, the marquee event is the 146th running of the Belmont Stakes, where California Chrome seeks to become a Triple Crown winner. Chrome is the 34th horse eligible to win the Triple Crown. Only 11 have succeeded. The Belmont Stakes Day race card is phenomenal, with an additional 9 stakes races including 5 Grade 1 events. These include the Metropolitan Handicap, the Ogden Phipps, the Knob Creek Manhattan, the Longines Just a Game, and the TVG Acorn. In total, the 13 race card will be worth in excess of $8 million, making it the second richest day on the North American racing calendar, behind only the Saturday Breeders' Cup. In addition to the racing, NYRA has provided a variety of other entertainment performances scheduled throughout the day. I would expect a very significant attendance. The last 2 times there was a Triple Crown on the line saw crowds exceeding 100,000, including a record 120,000 in 2004 when Smarty Jones was seeking immortality. From our perspective, we will have additional experienced personnel on site during the lead-up to the Belmont Stakes Day. NYRA and the Commission also continued the standard enhanced security protocols for horses running in the 4 $1 million plus Grade 1 stakes. These protocols require all horses potentially participating to be on grounds by noon on June 4th and be subject to out-of-competition testing. Trainers of the horses participating in the races must provide complete veterinary records for 3 days leading up to the race, which we will make public. And additionally, horses will be monitored at all times from their arrival at the track leading up to the races themselves. Chairman Gear?
Great. Any questions or discussion on any of this report? Great, thank you, Rob. Well, let's turn to rulemaking. The New York State Racing Parimutuel Racing Breeding Law 104.19 authorizes the Commission to promulgate rules and regulations that it deems necessary to carry out its responsibilities. To that regard, the Commission will from time to time promulgate rules and rule amendments pursuant to the State Administrative Procedure Act. Today we have 5 rulemaking items for consideration, and we've asked Rob to outline the various proposals.
Items 4A and 4B are companion pieces. Item 4A is an extension of an emergency rulemaking pertaining to the gaming facility request for application and various gaming facility license application forms, which were first adopted by the Commission on March 31st of this year. This emergency rule was published in the New York State Register on April 16th. The State Administrative Procedures Act allows adoption of an emergency rule for a maximum of 90 days. An emergency rule may be readopted, but each such readoption will be effective for a maximum of 60 days. To file a readoption, action must be initiated to adopt the rule as permanent, hence item 4B. Accordingly, for the Commission consideration is 1. A readoption of Part 5300 as an emergency rule, with such readoption to be filed with the Department of State prior to the expiration of the emergency rule. And 2. The proposed adoption of Part 5300 as a permanent rule.
So, Commissioners, any questions on the readoption of Part 5300 as an emergency rule, or the proposed adoption of Part 5300 as for permanent rules? Any questions for Rob? Any discussion? So, well, why don't we, I guess, break it up for each part of the motion. May I have a motion to for readoption of Part 5300 as an emergency rule?
So moved.
Moved and seconded? John?
Sure.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Motion carries. So now we turn to the motion to adopt Part 5300 as a permanent rule. May I have a motion? Moved. Made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. The motion carries.
The next item on the on the agenda regards restrictions on acceptance of public assistance. Items 4C and 4D are also companion pieces. The Federal Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012 required states to put in place policies and procedures to prevent federal public assistance benefits from being used in any electronic benefits transaction at designated types of businesses, including liquor stores, adult entertainment establishments, casinos, racinos, racetracks, and off-track betting facilities, and bingo facilities. To ensure compliance with the federal mandate, as part of the legislation necessary to implement the health and mental hygiene budget for state fiscal year 2014-2015, the New York legislature restricted the acceptance of federal public assistance benefits distributed by the state at such locations. The state legislation, which becomes effective on May 30th, authorizes the Commission to promulgate regulations on an emergency basis to implement these restrictions. The Commission and the predecessor agencies had for years directed most relevant facilities that it regulates to restrict EBT acceptance at all jurisdictions, including video lottery gaming facilities, racetracks, and off-track betting facilities. This rulemaking generally codifies existing practice.
Thank you, Rob. Commissioners, any questions regarding the proposed emergency or the proposed rulemaking on this restrictions for public assistance acceptance?
Not really a question about the material, but why did they leave it up to the states? I mean, if they say, why did the feds leave it up to the states? Do we know?
Ed, would you?
Yeah. No, my understanding of the way the federal programs work is there's block grants that move to the various states, so it's a condition that the federal government imposed upon the states in order to continue to receive the funding on a year-over-year basis. The states would have to demonstrate compliance with this federal law that the states would have to restrict in the fashion that we're doing.
It just seemed odd because they seem to be able to dictate whatever. It doesn't matter.
I suspect that's right, given the nature of this assistance. Yeah.
You think they could impose it at the federal level and just have it be so, right? No, honestly, if they block it out at the state level, it's federal. Well, it doesn't matter.
I think it's a bit of a federalism issue. The money's not actually coming directly from the federal government. It's flowing from the federal government through the states. So it's the states that have to take the action.
Interesting question of federalism.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Rob or others? Okay, well, may I have a motion to adopt the proposed or emergency rulemaking on restrictions on acceptance of public assistance?
So moved.
Made and seconded. Great. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. So secondly, the motion to adopt the proposed rulemaking on restrictions on public assistance. This is the second part of this. You want it separated.
Yes.
Right. Any discussion on that part of it?
I'm sorry, the first one was an extension of...
No, what was the initial emergency
Emergency
rulemaking?
rulemaking.
This is now for adoption of the proposal.
Right.
Or the change to the statute.
Yes, to conform.
Okay.
So it's to our regulations to conform with the state statute.
Sorry.
Any questions on the motion or background? Great. Well, why don't we have a motion has been made, I think, and seconded. Yeah. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. So the next item, we're working our way through here, is the an adoption of a proposed amendment relative to the lottery.
Yes, the next item for consideration is the adoption of a regulation governing the Commission's participation in a new planned multi-state lottery game called Cash for Life. If you recollect, the Commission authorized proposed rulemaking for this game on March 12, 2014. Notice of the proposed rulemaking was published in the State Register on April 9th. No public comments were received in regard to the proposal. This new game would have drawings each Monday and Thursday. For each $2 wager, a player may select 5 numbers out of a field of 60 and 1 number out of a field of 4. Players could also wager by way of quick picks, which allow the system to generate random numbers as selections. Generally, the jackpot prize would be $1,000 a day for life, with the second prize being $1,000 a week for life. As the game name suggests, the top 2 prizes would be paid for life. Lower level prizes would be one-time prize payments ranging between $2 and $2,500 in amount. This Cash for Life game would replace the current New York lottery game Sweet Million, which is also presently drawn on Mondays and Thursday evenings. Sweet Million has had limited success and has experienced slowing sales and declining consumer interest. Based on other four life-based prizes, we anticipate the net effect for aid to education to be between $8 and $9 million annually.
Any questions or discussion for Rob on this? I guess to begin, the other states, Rob, that will be joining this effort.
On the line, we have Gardner Gurney, who is the acting director of the lottery. And Gardner, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Chairman Guerin, the other states that will be joining is when this game starts, approximately June 13th, will be New York and New Jersey. With the drawings occurring in New Jersey, there are other states interested, including Virginia, Ohio, and some other states that may join after the end of the calendar year.
And what's the timing on this? When would we begin?
Our plan at this point is to start sales on Friday the 13th of June, with the first drawing on June 16th.
The lucky day.
Someone hits it that day.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions for Gardner? Anyone would have? So as I understand it, we discontinue this Sweet Millions game, and that is concurrent with this starting on June 13th?
That's correct. That game will end on Thursday the 12th, and the new game will start on the 13th.
I see. Okay. Any other questions on the regulation or the process? Well, may I have a motion to adopt rulemaking for the Cash for Life lottery game?
So
Moved, seconded?
second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, so we are through all of the rulemaking now at this point.
Correct.
So we begin adjudications on the agenda. And the commission has 4 hearing officer reports for consideration today. I've heard from members of the commission that the materials for the Dutrow and Casamayas consolidated hearing are quite voluminous, understandably, and additional time is necessary to properly review the materials. I think that is prudent. So unless anyone objects here, I'd like to continue consideration of that case until our next meeting. We can talk about our scheduled meetings with more regularity, but given the voluminous nature of this, it would seem prudent to schedule that. So unless there's any objection to that, we'll put that adjudicated matter to our next meeting. But I'll ask Mr. Williams to outline the first case.
Thank you. The first case regards Gregory J. Annalora, who was fined $1,000 and had his license suspended for 365 days for allegedly assaulting another driver, verbally abusing a racing official who tried to restore order, and verbally abusing and making contact with security personnel. Mr. Annalora appealed the sanctions, and a hearing was conducted November 14, 2013. All members have had received a copy of the hearing officer report and have had an opportunity to review the record of the hearing. Before consideration, however, I believe there is a legal matter regarding the hearing officer's recommendation that I think is best addressed by Counsel Burns.
Yes, I think if the commissioners were inclined to follow the gist of the hearing officer's recommendation, which essentially would end the suspension as of today, that the minutes should reflect your decision to make it a specific determinate time. In other words, the commission should not, I would recommend, again, phrasing it as a time served type of sanction, but to say that the suspension runs from the time it was imposed until May 27th, 2014. That would clarify the record for any subsequent litigation that may ensue about it, of what the actual length of the suspension was.
And it might come through, please.
But the suspension has been stayed, right? Is that correct?
It's currently stayed.
So he hasn't really had any time?
No, it's only stayed as of about 10 days ago.
Okay.
So
or a couple days
actually,
ago.
the period of
Less than
suspension is essentially a year. Am I correct about that?
It would be, the period would be, for instance, if you were inclined to go with the hearing officer's recommendation, you would be saying today that the suspension is in effect, an 11-month suspension ending today.
And the hearing officer had proposed a 1-year suspension.
The track level suspension was a 1-year suspension.
Right.
And
I'm sorry, not the hearing officer. The original.
The original track level
right,
suspension
right.
was a 12-month, 365-day suspension, and the hearing officer recommended that it be reduced.
Upon payment of the fine.
Yeah, and there's a commission rule for harness racing that whenever a fine remains unpaid, that's a separate basis to have a suspension until the fine is satisfied. So to separate the two, I think your record should reflect that you're upholding the fine if that's what you decide to do, and the suspension piece of it is a suspension through May 27th, 2014.
And as a result of doing that, if the fine were not paid, there would be a suspension until the fine is paid, but on account of the failure to pay the fine.
That's absolutely correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Is there a separate procedure for that, Ed? Are new charges filed?
No.
Failure to pay the fine?
No, it's not new charges, but it's under a commission rule that when a fine's imposed and it's unpaid by rule, the participant, the licensee, is not allowed to participate in racing until the fine's satisfied.
Any other questions for Mr. Burns on this? So, it is enough to have this within our motion as modified, to have the record reflect this.
Absolutely, yes.
That's how we
Yeah.
handle it.
Yeah, so I would suggest that the motion be phrased in terms of upholding the fine and reducing the suspension to end as of today's date.
We have that for the records.
Yeah, I'll make a motion for
Yeah.
the record, as Ed described it, to uphold the fine and to terminate the suspension effective upon our vote.
So a motion has been made and seconded?
I'll second it.
Okay. To adopt the hearing officer's report and confirm its findings and recommendations as modified. Is that correct?
That would be satisfactory, yes.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. The motion carries. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, we're going to go past the next item?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll put that to the next. Very good.
So 5C, in the matter of Luis A. Gutierrez. This case regards an appeal by thoroughbred owner-trainer Luis A. Gutierrez. The state steward at Finger Lakes Racetrack fined Mr. Gutierrez $1,000 and suspended his license for 15 days following a post-race positive drug violation for a horse under his charge, which ran in the 8th race at Finger Lakes on October 14, 2013. Specifically, the blood sample taken from the horse, E-Coach, showed an impermissible level of flunixin in violation of commission rules. Mr. Gutierrez appealed, and a hearing was conducted on November 21, 2013. All members have received a copy of the hearing officer's report and have had an opportunity to review a record of the hearing.
Would anyone like to discuss the report or recommendations?
In reviewing the Dutro matter, the regulations provided specific penalties for the milkshake violation. Is there a specific penalty for this drug?
There is not.
So the penalty was in the discretion of the hearing officer?
Ultimately in your discretion, but the recommendation...
The recommendation,
Yeah.
I meant.
Yes.
And did he have any type of guidelines as to what type of penalties are available?
Well, the hearing officer was a former member of the Racing and Wagering Board, and as such had some experience with adjudications of equine violations based on his experience in that role, and I believe that's what he drew upon in making his recommendation here.
I brought up at the last meeting that there's too broad discretion. You can fine anybody from $0 to $25,000 on some of these, and that we should look to have more specific penalties, since there's a very specific penalty for administering this milkshake. If you were to be found guilty of it, there should be similar specific penalties for administration of other drugs. I don't see the reason to differentiate, and maybe we should have a proposed rule on that regard, Rob, if the commission agrees.
Well, I think some of the differences, the way they've been set forth in the rules that we have now, is based on the propensity to actually affect race performance. Certain drugs are considered therapeutic overages, if you will, that they're drugs that have time limitations, that they can be administered up until, for example, 24 or 48 hours before the race. And there may be miscalibrations or overages, and there's certainly enough slack built into the rule that they would have to be substantial overages that could affect race performance. In a TCO2 violation, I think the thinking behind the establishment of the mandatory penalty was there is absolutely no therapeutic use or value to that type of alkalization of a horse's body chemistry, and therefore a strict sanction is necessary for that type of violation, whereas these other drugs, for example, in this case, there may be therapeutic values. It's just a matter of the timing of when it's administered. So there, it's not. There are differences among the types of drugs and the types of violations.
So are you saying if it's therapeutic, we don't need any guidelines?
No, I'm not suggesting one way or another about guidelines. I think I would suggest you don't need a mandatory sanction for something that's a therapeutic overage. There may need to be some discretion there to consider all the facts and circumstances of the violation.
I think John's just looking for some guidelines on that exercise of discretion. You raised it before. Speaking for myself only, I agreed with you when you raised it. It seemed like we had so much discretion that in these relatively small environments of the racing community, you're not quite sure what the motivations really are at any given time, and we can't really know. And so
I would just want to make sure that similarly situated people are treated similarly. So that,
mandatory minimum would achieve that, right? If not necessarily the maximum. You broke the rules, the guidelines, even if it was reasonably benign, which would be the decision of the hearing officer at all. You penalize them.
Rob, maybe what we ought to do is ask the staff to consider some guidelines, and we can consider them when you guys have put an option in front of us. That sound fair, Mr. Chairman?
So at least minimums, right?
We can also provide a background paper as to how these are.
I would be
addressed
interested in
and
that.
how
What
it's
is the
addressed.
legislative history, or what is the reason why we don't have it?
John, are you thinking like the federal guidelines, which are now advisory, so you would have a guideline range?
yes,
So that's
something
similarly
that
situated.
even the penal law, you don't have this broad a range in terms of what you can fine or suspend somebody for.
Right.
Especially when someone who did the exact same offense might be suspended for 1 month and be fined $50, where someone who did it the next week may have a different hearing officer who fines him $10,000 and suspends him for a year.
This came up in a case where our discussion was focused on exactly this issue.
Sure, I understand.
So we'll leave that to you, Rob, and your
Yes.
colleagues to come back with a background memo.
We'll certainly do that.
Can I
Because
have one
there's different
follow-up
ways to do it.
question?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
sure.
before we, I don't know if might get to a caught by a vote. I just want to understand, if you look at the findings of fact, the hearing officer finds that Mr. Gutierrez is the trainer of record. If he finds that he understands who the trainer of record is and that there is an impermissible level of whatever the impermissible drug is given in the case. Is that all that the rule requires?
We have what's called a trainer's responsibility record, where in effect the trainer is strictly liable for whatever is found in the horse.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Okay, any other questions? May I have a motion then to adopt the hearing officer's report and confirm its findings and recommendations as submitted? So moved. Second? Second. Great. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
The last case regards an appeal by exercise rider Robert S. Messina. The state steward at Finger Lakes Racetrack fined Mr. Messina $100 for disregarding an instruction of the paddock judge and conducting himself in a disrespectful manner in violation of commission rules. Mr. Messina appealed, and a hearing was conducted December 9th, 2013. All members have had received a copy of the hearing officer's report and have had an opportunity to review the record of the hearing.
Would anyone like to discuss the report or its recommendations?
Go
ahead.
You and I tend to have the same issues. This one strikes me, as I understand it, there is not an explicit rule against the conduct that gave rise to the whole discussion, right? Carrying an unlit cigarette, as I understand it. If I got the right case?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's no explicit rule against that in the paddock?
Right.
And I completely understand the need for civility and decorum with respect to the paddock judge, and I support that wholeheartedly.
At Finger Lakes.
Anywhere.
Especially at Finger Lakes.
So, okay. I just want to make sure that there isn't, I just want to make sure there isn't something just completely personal at work, and I think we have to rely on the hearing officer to determine that.
Right.
But I just wanted to sort of observe. It strikes
$100 on a cigarette and a couple of wise-ass comments.
I mean, who knows? I mean, there is an allegation by the trainer. The trainer, yes. The exercise. Who was it now?
Exercise rider.
Exercise rider. That there had been a history.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have no choice but to assume that the hearing officer made his findings in light of that history.
Yes.
Bad precedent to overturn these guys. So I think I'll vote yes, but honestly, this one is a borderline one at best. If it's $100.
Any other discussion or question on the report? Well, then, can I have a motion to adopt the hearing officer's report, confirm its findings and recommendations as submitted?
I'll make the motion.
Motion's made and seconded. Second, okay. Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? The motion carries. So that concludes the matters we had to do. We can turn now to the Racing Fan Advisory Council presentation, which is our next item on the agenda. We've asked Rob to provide some background for the record on the establishment and the purpose of the council.
In September 2011, the New York State Racing and Wagering Board formally created, I might add at the urging of former Chairman John Sabini, the New York Racing Fan Advisory Council to provide input and advice to the board, now the commission, on horse racing and wagering matters in New York State. Upon establishment, the commission explicitly continued the council's existence. Members of the council are required to be long-term racing fans, selected on their involvement, interest, knowledge, and devotion to the sport. The council has 5 members. 3 are appointed by commission chairman, 2 are appointed, 1 each by the chair of the Senate Committee on Racing, Gaming, and Wagering, and 1 by the chairman of the Assembly Committee on Racing and Wagering. As outlined in the establishment directive, the council's mission is to grow the fan base related to the sport of horse racing by, among other things, recommending procedures to ensure that the opinion of the fan is a central part of the regulation of horse racing, and advising the Commission on issues related to horse racing and wagering, advising the Commission on appropriate actions to encourage fan attendance and wagering at the state's thoroughbred and harness racetracks and the state's off-track betting corporations, recommending changes to the rules of the Commission and to the laws affecting horse racing, and preparing an annual report regarding the operation of the state's thoroughbred and harness racetracks and the state's off-track betting corporations.
So my understanding is today members of the council will present their annual report. At this time we're fortunate to have the council's chair, Mr. Patrick Connors. He's a professor of law at Albany Law School, has been an avid fan of horse racing since 1989, has made several presentations at Albany Law School's annual Saratoga Institute on racing and gaming law. Professor Connors, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Guerin, and thank you very much for the invitation. With me, I have Michael Amo, who's also a member of our council, and you may know Michael is also the chair of Thoroughfan, which is the largest organization of racing fans in the country. And on the line, we have Kelly Young, who is the Associate Director of National Affairs for the New York Farm Bureau, and she's also a valuable member of the committee. If I could just highlight some of the proposals in our report. Number one, always a hot button issue, is that we are recommending that the tracks re-examine their takeout rates to see if that would have an impact on business. The New York Racing Association, as of last fall, established a new bet, the Pick 5, with a 15% takeout rate, and that's generated a lot of business if you compare that pool to some of the other pools. Also, Tioga Downs has the lowest takeout rates allowed under the law, and they've had a lot of success at their track with that. Michael, did you want to speak to another aspect of this?
Well, I do. Thanks, Chairman Goddard. I think that as fans of the sport, I think sometimes we're misrepresented as what our role is. I think we are equal stakeholders in the sport. If you take the handle as a topic here, $10 billion is taken in handle every year across the country, and if you geographically take that to New York State, with a 20% takeout average blended, the fans put on the table $500 million a year in racing. When you walk up to the window and their 20% takeout is taken to the operation of the track. And so the takeout is critical to the fans in terms of their ability to return and a profit and to make money at the track. And I think it's also a critical statement about how important the fans are to the sport and to recognize as a stakeholder. I think we noticed that rarely in any board of directors or a fan have a representative in the track or entity in the county, except for the Racing Fan Advisory Council, which I would proudly say to all of you is the only organization in the country where fans have an input to the regulatory body, and New York State should be proud that Mr. Sabini started that process. We're the only one to do that. And I think that there should be some consideration. I mean, even the NYWA board, for example, has an ex officio racing horseman representing the horsemen, but there's no fan represented in that board. Finger Lakes and other tracks, OTB, none of those are really represented. I think that it's important when we look at what fans do as one of the three legs of the stool of racing, whether it be the horsemen of the tracks or the fans, we all have an equal part. And I think that's a message we'd like to add to that. So when it comes to takeout, I think we should look at it. There's debates about whether or not it's a good idea or not to raise it or lower it. Everybody's study is weak or strong, depending on your statistical understanding. But we think we should get that to some closure to decide whether it is an advantage to do it.
Second, I guess, major point in the report would be the attendance at racetracks. We're concerned that racing is more and more becoming a sport run in absentia, and you see closings of racetracks throughout the country. And we make recommendations in our report to the tracks to encourage fans to come on site. That could be done through discounts for parking, admission, wagering. You see how casinos are able to do that, and this again may require some changes in the law, but we think the tracks need to look at that. Another part of our report addresses the price increases at the NYS tracks, namely at Saratoga and Belmont Park, and we're concerned about those because the attendance has gone down. I expect the attendance for the spring 2014 meeting at Belmont to be rather strong in light of the Triple Crown, but if you look at the attendance figures, they are going down. They are low, and I think that puts the sport of horse racing in a compromising position in dealing with the public. And to the extent that the tracks can reward the person who comes through the gate. One other interesting thing we've looked into, and I think it would require a change in the law, but this would really, I think, bring out the wagerer. If you could offer on track a wager that would not be available at OTV or not be available through the phone or the internet, that might be another way to attract people to the tracks themselves. Michael, I think you wanted to speak to the issue of handicapping contests.
Yes, sir, Chairman. We have a recommendation that we should look at this as a state. Across the country, contests, handicapping contests are prevalent. They're growing. Just about every weekend you can participate in one. Some of them are free, put on by NTRA, some of them cost you money. I participated in one sponsored by a number of them, but the one recent one sponsored by West Point Thoroughbreds, and I think if I remember right, there was probably 10,000 fans that signed up for the contest. And I placed 1,400, but I'm okay. I'm not very good at doing that, but I think it's an exciting way to bring people into the game and let them experience the game in a fun way. And I think our state rules limit our ability to do that. NYRA does a great job at trying to run major handicapping contests, and those are for the big players. I think you need to think about ways you can do a lot more activity year-round.
Chairman Guerin, we conducted a public meeting last June up in Schenectady, and we also had outreach at the racetracks. We had a table at the Belmont Stakes last year. We had a public forum on New York Showcase Day at Belmont Park in the fall, and then we had a public forum at Saratoga Racing and Gaming on the harness side. Something that we hear about frequently from the fans is they're troubled by the odds changing after the race goes off. Now, this isn't the races in Galway where you can purchase your bet.
That's how you can tell who the winner is.
Yeah, and be guaranteed, an outcome. But that was a concern raised by many of the fans, and we thought that maybe the tracks could do a better job to educate the fans as to why that might happen. The scoreboard is used throughout the day at the various tracks to promote various parts of the track, racing. We think if there could be an educational component to that presentation and in other venues to help educate the fans on why that might happen. Michael, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think across the country, I think racetracks think fan education is how to pick a winner. And they miss the whole concept about the sport and what the people need to know about the sport that leads into it. We've run a number of education programs as my group Thoroughfan, and the example I would give to you, I had a woman come to an education program at Saratoga, raise her hand and ask me what the numbers in the starting gate were for. And immediately it told me how broad the knowledge is. Yet most education at the tracks is, who's going to win the trifecta, why is this horse going to run better, rather than some of the more basic stuff. And I think we need to think about, is fan education a major component of track operations? And maybe even part of the licensing agreement where, when you do it, you must have some type of education program that addresses things like and other issues.
The next global issue, integrity in the game. And this really came up in your agenda item 5. The fans are very concerned about the penalties being imposed on trainers, jockeys, and we're surprised everywhere we go, both on the harness side and the thoroughbred side. That's something that the fans always voice concern over, the alleged use of drugs on the tracks, and they, I think, want to know what's being done about it, and if there's a way to better educate them as to the procedures and the penalties, I think that would be very helpful. We also wanted to know, we're encouraged that the commission has asked us to review the stewards' procedures. And that's another very confusing part of the game for the fan that comes maybe the fifth time to the racetrack, and they wager on a horse, and the horse is taken down. And there really isn't a great explanation for why that's done. And to the extent that we can educate the fans in that area, we think it would be very helpful.
Just a comment, some of you know some of the other tracks, Hong Kong is a great example, is that they publish the stewards report at length. So if you wonder what happened, you can go look that up. And we don't do it that well in New York or in the United States. And so a fan could say, well, how come my horse was taken down? I don't know. And you really never get the answer. You might get a media report of 2 or 3 lines, but you don't really get the answer. And I think that, and under that, if you don't mind jumping in, I think that one of the things that we came up with on integrity, and it's in the report, is that there should be some type of real hotline where folks can call in if they see something, sort of under the aegis of see something, say something, on the track. Because I think there's a lot that goes on that certainly the fans can see and say, hey, wait a minute, we got a problem here. Somebody should look into it.
And they should record it.
And they should record it. Okay. I think that there's just, we see things, but you don't have an opportunity to say this is a problem. So I think that's a really good one. And one of the things I would take a time to talk about, and I really compliment NYRA and the New York Tracks, is I'm on the advisory board of the NTRA's Safety and Integrity Alliance, which accredits racetracks across the country. And I've been on it for about 5 years, and we developed the standards. In New York, all our tracks are accredited. That's a good thing. I would really think New York might take the lead and make it a requirement, and let other states know that you need to have a national, good housekeeping approval stamped by a national organization of what you're doing. It wouldn't hurt. We're doing it already. I think it would send the message to other people. This is an important thing to do. And it's a rigorous experience. I know Mr. Kay could probably stress it. It's a rigorous experience that we ask, that the accreditation process asks about.
The next point would be the rewards programs at the various tracks. Our recommendation is to bring the rewards down from, the whales are being rewarded. But we like to see programs that award the regular fan who might be putting, let's say, even $500 a year through the windows. It's some way to give them a reward we think would help establish a better fan base. And I guess the last item would be a budget. These meetings that we have, the fan forums, we've relied on NYRA's generosity, and NYRA has been very helpful in giving us space, and Chris Kay, the NYRA has given us the handouts, basically the calendars and things, which really the fans appreciate. But we really are reliant on the tracks to get the word out, and sometimes we're a bit handcuffed in promoting the events that we're having. So there is a recommendation in the report for a budget. Michael, did you want to add anything else?
I think just 2 things on that. One of the things that we work with the Gaming Commission staff on is we thought about having the farm to finish, the farm award, non-monetary award. And the whole idea behind that is that if you have a farm in St. Lawrence County, what are you doing to promoting the sport? Are you opening your breeding farm? Are you opening your farm up so fans, local people can go in and see what it's about, learn about the sport? Or we're only putting it on the back of the racetrack? If we started thinking about ways that we can encourage other parts of the racing industry to help talk about our sport, I think that would be a good thing. I know Old Friends up in Saratoga does something similar on New Year's Day. They have a birthday party because every horse turns a new age at that point, and they invite fans to come in. And it's a wonderful experience, and I thought, well, what couldn't we do, have something like that around the state, maybe make it competitive. We tried to get started, but certainly it takes resources. Charlie Diamond and I have worked on that a little bit to try to get it going, but it takes resources. And one of our members of the board, Michael Mills, has proposed a symposium for fans in New York State, that we would be able to say, well, let's have an opportunity for fans to come and learn about the sport. Maybe they want to know what to do, how to place a bet. Maybe they want to come to a central location. It'd certainly be better than getting 20 or 30 people to come to one of our forums. If you get 300 or 400 people to come to a major event, again, funding would be important.
And then finally, we'd like to take questions, but we also would like to acknowledge Lee Park's assistance, Chairman Guerin, through I guess we're in our 3rd year now, and he really has helped us in innumerable ways. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Well, your final point is no surprise to any of us about Lee's good work. But thank you for your for your report and for all that you're doing. For follow-up, just question, so much of you mentioned is the educational piece of this, greater awareness. Where would you see that happening for fan base to learn more? How would you imagine this being executed?
Where would we see it? Well, we think the tracks should be encouraged, and you see this up at Saratoga. They, I don't know if they had it last summer, but 2 summers ago, they had places where fans could go to learn about, how to place a bet for the fan that. And now, actually, when NYRA changed their machines, they had booths set up at Belmont in the fall to demonstrate how somebody could place a bet with the new system. But we think that education could go to even a more novice fan base, because it's very intimidating for the fan to come into the track for the first, second time and seeing all these numbers. If we had something for them, or maybe even they sit through a session and they get a $5 voucher or something like that, that might be a way. We also think we could do it on site. And Michael's point, the Daily Racing Forum has a big convention in Vegas every year, and they have their writers and handicappers that educate the fans. I think there's a way that we could have a similar conference in New York, which is really the center of thoroughbred racing in the country, where we could draw fans in and provide education at that.
Not just to mention, when we think a little bit about, and all deference to the racetrack operators, marketing has their goal, and we understand what that is, but it's not necessarily good education.
Right.
And I think that's where we're down. And when you get to education and you go down the budget, priorities for a given year, I suspect fan education falls a little bit down near the bottom. And we need to be thinking about it. You need to have educators who know how to teach a lesson, to teach somebody. Tom Amello, who was up in Saratoga, used to do a TV show, a retired school teacher involved in our organization, talks about doing lesson plans. How do I teach new fans? As opposed to, I'm a marketing guy and I'm just going to come on TV and tell you who's going to win. You got to think it through. So I would think that the track should have some type of a venue, whether it's a on-site tent or an on-site opportunity where a real education program is put out, that fans who don't know what the starting gate numbers are can go and ask those questions without being embarrassed.
Right.
And I think you've got television opportunities. I think you've got internet opportunities to do interactive. And some of it's not being done. But
from your perspective, Michael, you said the fan information base might be different than the track's marketing base.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see that play out? What's the difference in your mind?
Simply said, I think the marketing job is to get people to sit in the seats, come to the track, and meet their goal of investing in it. I think education is a more long-term effort. How do you find folks and bring them into the sport if they might want to learn to bet, they might want to learn more about the sport, maybe someday they'll want to be an owner, join a partnership. So it's a whole, and teaching them about the sport from, we did a program, my group did a program in Saratoga 3 years ago at the Stacey Tipton's stable, and we called it From the Farm to the Finish Line. And we got over 400 people, about 400 people came on a Sunday morning to that venue to listen to speak, and we had interesting speakers. We just were the promoters of it. We had Case Clay from Three Chimneys speak about the breeding aspect. We had Wayne Lucas talk about as a trainer. He was a person. We had Meg Levy talk about how do you sell a horse, what do you do in that process. And of course our star was Bobby Flay, who was our speaker on being an owner. And then, I mean, it was fantastic. Meg Levy brought a yearling on the stage and actually showed confirmation to 400 people who probably would never be that close to that experience ever before. And she was measuring confirmation and showing the design and everything. It was so informational to people, and feedback we got was terrific. It had nothing to do about who you're going to bet on that afternoon. It was introducing you to the sport. And I think if we invest in that, we're going to build our base, which is what I think our group and I think we're trying to. How do we build a base?
How is that different than, say, NYRA's marketing? Aren't they trying to build the base?
Well, I'm sure they are. I would have to ask Mr. Kay to respond to what his goal is.
Or the Breeders' Association, yeah.
I think everybody's trying to do it for different reasons.
I think NYRA is trying to build a base, but if you get on the website and you look at the majority of what they're doing, it's to attract somebody who's already involved in the sport and is already wagering. most of it is at that end of the spectrum. Whereas something we see is we believe that the sport needs new customers. Now, the tracks are all doing that to a degree. I think Tioga is doing a great job of that because they've gotten a fan base together up there without a history of a track in that area. But we think that that's something that the tracks could do more of. And if you look at NYRA, you look at you get online, you see, Andy Serling. I can understand Andy Serling, but sometimes it's difficult. Somebody walking in the door, I take my wife to the track. She doesn't understand Andy Serling. My kids don't understand Andy Serling. It's trying to get to those people. And it's another thing we've talked about, and people have brought it up, where you want the sport to be such that it's something that you can take your significant other and children to, and it doesn't have I guess some kind of a dark cloud hanging over it.
I think one of the persons at Saratoga or another actually said to us, "Please help us with the image."
Yeah.
He said, "If I'm a horse player and I go to the track, somehow I'm considered less than." And I responded, an example I say to people is that I'm not a golfer. I have a lot of friends who are. And on Saturday they go out and golf, and they're 19th holes and all the things they do. I decided to go to Belmont. And I take $200 or $500 with me to Belmont, and I have a terrible day and I lose it all. My friends go to the golf club, they spend $500 that day. They come home and their significant other says to them, "Did you have a good time?" What do they say to me? "Did I win?" What do you care? I had a good time. It was my entertainment. And I think that's part of the image that we need to do. I like to win, and I don't think it's, but I mean, it's part of the entertainment. I think Mr. Kay is trying to, when he talks about the fan experience, and I think that's really trying to make you feel like this is an entertainment venue. This is something we should enjoy. It's not just a way to make money. I tell people when I write my articles, like, keep the day job. Keep the day job. This is just fun.
You represent the fans at Aqueduct as well?
Well, all over the country. It's not an individual. We have 700-800 members that are active members. We have mailing us about 1,000. We have chapters in New York City, Monmouth Park, South Florida, Saratoga Springs, and Southern California. We have groups, and those groups, and we have a base of fans. And we do a weekly newsletter and a website, and try to do meetups at the track and try to encourage people to get together. We give an annual award every year to an industry person who we think has promoted the fan base the most. We do it at Gulfstream Park every year in January at Eclipse Awards week. We're the fan event down there, and we draw 100 or so members that come to the group. Our first awardee was Patrice Wolfson, we all know is the owner of Affirmed, and she was our first awardee. And last year we gave it to Cott Campbell, who has Palace Malice and has done so much to bring fans. And we're coming up on our third year trying to find our next awardee. But we try to go out and reach out to people and say, here's the people who help us do what we want to accomplish.
We had a fan forum at Aqueduct. I think it was the first one we had. And 6 months of the year, the racing is conducted there. And we still hope that somehow that venue can be used to attract fans and bring fans. So the largest restaurant in New York City is the restaurant there at Aqueduct, as far as I know. And if there's a way, you've got all those people going out there, they're right next door, and it's hope that you could somehow use that opportunity to get them on the other side. You won't see it to the extent you see it at Saratoga, but an increase there would be something I think would be welcome, given that racing's run there for 6 months out of the year.
You talked about an on-track wager only as a way of attracting folks to the track. What would that look like, and is that done any other place?
We haven't seen it done at any other place. It would be a wager where the takeout essentially was lower, or maybe you could come up with a wager that's just attractive but not offered. You have these rainbow wagers that are available at tracks outside of New York, something like that, where you could have a lower takeout and or a unique wager that you couldn't find elsewhere to encourage people to come out to the track.
Yeah, I think if you saw the Rainbow Six down at Gulfstream Park, it's been a success. 20-cent bet, and it's somewhat lottery-like, because even if you pick the 6 winners, you got to be the only winner to collect. If you don't, you only get a percentage of the pool. Well, the grew to almost $7 million when a gentleman hit it on Sunday. for 20 cents. 20 cents got him $7 million.
Great story is the
Got a lot of
guy that essentially won it, but he bet it twice, so there wasn't only one winner and he didn't collect.
But is there an identifiable group of non-betting fans?
Excuse me?
Is there an identifiable group of non-betting fans?
Unfortunately, yes.
A lot of folks go to the ball game and they bet. You know, some people go to the ball game to watch the ball game. Is there an identifiable, significant group of individuals who go to the track to watch the races?
Absolutely, it's diminished. When Secretariat was retired, he went out to Aqueduct. I think they conducted a program at 10 o'clock in the morning on a weekday, and I think they had several thousand fans there. There was no wagering or anything going on. But yeah, we do hear from those people that come to the track, and they're just there for the experience.
For the sport, yeah.
Exactly, just for the sport, and I think that group is diminishing. I think we need to do something to build that group up.
And that shrinkage you attribute to what?
I think that a lot of it's the perception of horse racing, and I think a lot of it is if you're a fan and you're not wagering and you go, there's not a lot offered to you. There's little things like Mary, what's Mary's last name who does the morning? Mary Ryan does a great program in Saratoga in the morning where, you go, you can bring your breakfast in. I bring my kids there. She talks about the horses. She identifies the horses, which is important. And then she gives away posters and things like that. My kids, other children, families, they love it. And the tracks need to do more to promote that, that family experience and the fan experience.
I think our group has a larger percentage of women members than we really expected as a percentage of people who like the sport. And a lot of them are owners. They're part of the partnership movement. They like to be part of it. They want to take care of the aftercare, so they're involved in getting involved in that, and they like to go to the races and enjoy it. On the other hand, we always try to encourage them to place a wager because that's how we fund the industry. So you got to do a little bit of both to make the industry succeed. But there are a lot of
kids
people
can't
who love
bet,
the
but they may have an interest in the races.
Yep. Yeah, they do.
And on that, something that, you hear, it's a lot less expensive to go to a racetrack than it is to go to a Yankee game or a Met game. And even if you do wager a reasonable amount. And if we could somehow reach those fans who either are not gambling or, with an idea that they might gamble $20 and go to the racetrack. And highlight that, yeah, it's a great experience, and it's a lot less expensive than going elsewhere. And I think a big part of that, you see it at Saratoga when the jockeys walk through the crowd, is the contact with the fans. And the more the sport can, encourage that, where the fans are right there, close enough to the horses, with the jockeys, the owners, the trainers are all there. That's something you don't get in a lot of the other sports today.
My family is a classic example of what you're talking about. When my children were little and we were in Saratoga, we took them to the track. I'm not a bettor. I wasn't a bettor then. It is intimidating to the non-bettor because you're not sure what to do, so you avoid the tellers, who are very helpful if you get yourself up there, but you just have to get yourself up there. And we had the added advantage of being surrounded by horsemen because of where we live. But over time, for us, we were able to learn the system. My children went. It was like a festival for them. And then they grew up, and we bought horses off the track, retired horses, or took them, and own them now just to ride them. But my children are now older, and they can go and bet, and they bring their friends, their college friends. But it was a slow process. And I was thinking your idea, if there were areas on the track of Saratoga where almost like someone was walking and could talk to people about, if you want to place a bet, this is the way to do it. It's really simple. This is what you say to the teller. They'll tell you exactly what you need to do. Not the sophisticated bets, but they have to start somewhere, right? And I think that's a fabulous idea because you have to see it. You have to see it because the sophisticated bettors get older and then they go away. There's a rate of attrition there. So you have to have new blood to be interested in it. And the second thing, to me, from what I hear and from the circles that I come from, there's the two big concerns are drugs and the way the horses are treated, whether it's just a perception. And when something goes wrong, it's sometimes blown out of proportion, but it's front and center. That is a big, big concern of non-attendees and attendees. And then what happens to the horses after, when they're done, which is a big problem. There's so many a finite number of people that can take all those horses. Right? It's not easy to sustain a horse after they're done. So I think if somewhere along the line you can address those and address them seriously, I think the sport's in a better shape.
Just a comment on the aftercare. Not that the NTRA with Jack Wolf, who Starlight Stable, that group that owns Shanghai Bobby, heads up a group called the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, and I sit on the advisory board. My background is in healthcare, and I did a lot of joint commission accreditation stuff and helping hospitals get accredited, so I write standards. So I sort of got the role of sitting in this group to learn how to write standards. How do you rate a standard? And that's how I kind of write it. But it's exciting. We've raised, I don't know, probably $5 million in the last year, and we're crediting farms across the country so they can take the horses and we can help pay for it. It's a great idea, and I think it's growing across the country. Tracks are participating in it as well, but it's a big issue, and I think fans want to see that. They really do. They don't like to see.
I think they want to see what's happening from the breeder to the owner, and then what happens afterwards, and who is responsible for the care of the animal, because that's a big concern. And I'm a big fan of racing. I love the track. I think it's a great thing, and I'm a big fan of horses. But I know I hear that concern constantly. Also, a concern that there's a lot of fundraising for that, but why is that necessary when maybe that's the responsibility of the industry? And I know that's an expensive venture, and owning horses, I know it's a very expensive venture. From the vet to the farrier to the feed to the to the board to whatever you have. So.
There's a small partnership that friends of mine are involved in called Mosaic Stables, and nobody really wants to make money. It's all friends, and they put a 401k together. When you buy the horse, when you buy into it, they set aside a certain amount of money for aftercare, and so much of the purse money goes into that fund. So if the horse is no longer able to run, you can give them away along with some money to say, here, take care of it.
I'd heard
it's a good idea.
Talk about annuities.
Yeah, that's right. So that's not as sophisticated, but the one they're doing. Yeah, it's a good idea. Patrick, you got to take that responsibility.
You raised two points I just wanted to follow up on. You were talking about the perception, I guess, in the fan base or whomever it is that you generally are speaking for, so I think it's the fan base, that there was a lack of transparency in the rulings of the stewards and the discipline in the paddock and on the track, etc. Is the concern, and maybe there's no answer to this, but is the concern that decisions are arbitrary and too stringent, or that there's too much leniency? I didn't understand the comment when you made it. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you're saying.
I'm recalling specifically, Michael, when we were up at Saratoga Racino, some of the people there, and again, these are the harness fans, they were very upset that the word was that various trainers were clearly using illegal drugs or methods with their horses, and they weren't being punished for it.
So the concern is for more stringent enforcement.
On that end, yes. I think as far as there's another group of fans, though, that are concerned about, I think, transparency and clarity with regard to rulings at the track, like why a horse might be taken down. And these are usually the regular customers.
Right, I understood it could happen.
But they're more concerned with the clarity in the rules regarding the racing and why the stewards are very specific as to why a horse would come down.
Yeah, I think it's, it was that old management axiom that without the facts you get rumors, and I think that's the thing. If you don't put the facts out, people will create their own facts.
They'll fill in the space themselves. Yeah.
There's nothing more frustrating to go into the ninth race at a racetrack and be alive in the pick four looking at a $3,000 ticket and get a photo finish and wonder why you lost. And you go, how did I had the Florida Derby. I had 3 horses. I got beat by a horse in a $4,000 pick four. Why did that happen? How did he really get by him? Didn't he shove him? I don't know the answer to that question. But the average fan's going to go, there must be something wrong. I didn't win. That's the point I'm making. I'm not saying it's wrong. But
should have spread more in the last leg.
I should have. I went 4 deep. I should have gone down. Right?
There was one other point that you raised. I just wanted to give you a chance to help me understand it. When you made the comment about the takeout, the way I understood it when you first said it was that it's the takeout that has the ability to improve the fan experience. Did I understand you correctly, Michael? I think you said that.
Yeah, I think, to a degree. I think it's, and maybe it's a smaller segment of the fan. We hear about churn. If somebody has less money taken out, you're likely to put it back in the window. You're likely to have more money coming back in, and you feel like you're into it. I think at the same time, the larger players, which we're fighting against, can go offshore and get all kinds of benefits from them, and if our takeout. So it's just looking at it. And then the argument we've heard from horsemen is that, if you reduce the takeout, it's going to be less revenue for us. They're taking 20% off the top on the average, less revenue. I understand that, but there are people who've said that they can prove that generates more handle, and there's people who say that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But that has to be resolved. That's our point.
So your point is only a study is necessary.
That's what I think.
Because I thought I heard you saying that if there was relatively more takeout, there'd be relatively more funds to improve the experience at the track. That's what I thought I heard you saying. That's not what you're saying. And then but just to make my point clear, I definitely heard you saying that the track-only bet could benefit from reducing the takeout.
Well, the hope would be that if the tracks offered a bet that you could only get on the track, it would increase attendance.
I mean,
I don't know that it would. I don't know what it would do to the bottom line, and maybe you would take a loss in that pool if you're the track. But you have the people on site, so hopefully you'd be generating revenue from other sources.
Also, the signal cost, I think, Mr. is less on cross bets.
So your point of view is it needs some study.
Yeah, I think there's two different things. One would be to attract the fan on site. The other is just really to market that, like the popularity of that Pick 5 bet that NYRA offers now. It's gone through the roof, and what Tioga has done is it's more attractive to the fan to know the takeout is, let's say, at 15%. And again, this is for the more seasoned horse player or a seasoned fan. They find that attractive, and the studies, there's conflicting studies on that. But I think Barry Schwartz many years ago, his idea was we're going to reduce this to 15% or so, the takeout rates, because in the end we're going to get more money through the windows. Right?
I mean, he went bankrupt.
Well, maybe.
Bygones.
You get to zero, sure.
No, I don't think there's got to be a mix.
But my only point was, you guys you're not proposing that you've done a study.
No.
And
we don't have the funds for
We haven't
I
got the
understand.
funds.
Okay.
We think it could be done. We think there probably could be sort of an anthology, it's the wrong word, I guess, of all the studies we've done to bring it together and say, what do we know here?
And who are you suggesting is the right sponsor for the study?
I think Gaming Commission would be a place to begin. I think the Racing Fan Advisory Council, if we had a budget, could do it. And I think it would be most unbiased to look at it. I think the data's out there. The data are out there. It's just a matter of looking at it and saying, what does it really mean? Because whenever we raise it, we get opinions from different people, and they quote this study or that study or this study. And I think the one point that Pat made about special wages for on track, maybe I know I've been playing the game too long. I was telling Mr. K, my first day at the races out of graduate school was the Aladair Affirmed race at Belmont, and I haven't missed a Belmont Stakes in 36 years. So I mean, I've been around a little longer, but it seems to me that you really can't get into this game unless you can smell the hay. You can't get into this game unless you're really there at the track. Otherwise, it's just a numbers game. There's a whole lot about being there and feeling the experience and understanding it. We know it at Saratoga real well. Keeneland, wonderful experience, when you go to Keeneland. And even the breakfast that's at Gulfstream brings you into that experience. You got to feel like this is something I enjoy doing. This is not just how do I make a living. Let's bet. This is a sport that you should enjoy.
Thank you.
Does the takeout vary among states, or what's the ranges from what to what? I mean,
Boy, I think we studied that.
New York, right?
It does range anywhere from, I think, 14% up to 25% based on the various bets, but it's all governed, I think in every state it's governed by state law, as it is here in New York.
I think we were told, when we looked at this at one of our meetings, and I think it's substantial.
has anyone ever looked at the health of the industry in relationship to the takeout at all, or not really? I guess that's what the study would be that we're talking about, so let me shut up.
I think that one thing we realize here is that I think our own statute says, in New York says, that a track can ask the commission to change the takeout rate. And somehow we don't, and it can be done as frequently as quarterly. But we never seem to talk about it because there seems to be discussion never gets anywhere.
Yeah, Lee Park is showing a chart to me where the ranges in New York go from 15 up to, I guess, 25%. But that does, I know we had some data on what other states are doing. That's fairly typical of what other states are doing.
I see. Okay.
But the tracks have an opportunity under law to apply for a lowering of the takeout. As we saw, Tioga started very low, at the minimum, but we haven't seen the records we were able to uncover show that most tracks were not applying for a lower takeout.
Well, thank you. For any more questions or thank you. It was very helpful to us. Thank you for all that you've done for the sport. We can next turn on our agenda to new and old business. Consider any new business first before we go backwards a little bit. Going back to old businesses, a couple of things. First, at our March meeting, the issue was raised by Commissioner Crotty regarding concerns to the actions of stewards at Thoroughbred Racetracks, and Rob's going to give us an update.
Sure. Actually, I'd like to ask Ron Okram, who's our acting director of the Division of Horse Racing and Parimutuel Wagering, to weigh in on this. Ron, are you still on the call?
Yes, I am. Thank you. This fits into our discussion, what we just heard from the Racing Fan Advisory Council. Let me provide some background on an item we have been working on. Since the Commission's meeting in March, staff has spent considerable time in discussing and reviewing the initiative proposed by Commissioner Crotty that would increase transparency and reform of the stewards' practices of explaining their official calls and actions to the public. Currently, information regarding inquiries at Belmont Aqueduct and Saratoga are provided by the stewards in the Stewards Corner on NYRA's website. The site provides a basic explanation of what the stewards decided after an inquiry has been posted. The initiative we are examining would expand on that process by providing a weekly report with additional information available to the public. Specifically, the proposal would require, among other things, a vote summary and who the steward spoke with in reviewing the facts to decide on an inquiry. The report would not only provide information on stewards' decisions, but also other important information that the public should be provided. All this information would be compiled and summarized in a written report that would be available by track on the Gaming Commission's website. Over the past 2 months, we have been researching what other states do, where such reporting is currently provided. In the United States, California, Delaware, Washington have written stewards reports that are available on their respective commission websites. We are reviewing them to determine what information is provided and the timeline for each report, daily or weekly. In the development of this proposal, we have also sought out the expertise of the ones that would be preparing these reports, namely the stewards. In fact, we have already discussed the proposal with the stewards working at the NYRA tracks. In April, Acting Executive Director Williams and I met with State Steward Steve Lewandowski, NYRA Steward Braulio Baeza, and Jockey Club Steward Dr. Ted Hill, and discussed the concept and specific reporting items. We were specifically interested in their feedback and opinions on not just requiring such information, but how such information could be provided in the least restrictive manner. We discussed the following: providing that all individual votes by the stewards involving the possible disqualification of horses be maintained and disclosed, providing a record of all horses tested for drugs after races and disclosed by the stewards, maintaining a record of contacts made by the stewards during the course of any inquiry or objection. The preliminary meeting with the stewards at NYRA was not only productive but well received by all three stewards in presenting the proposal and receiving their feedback. We will also be meeting in the next week or so with the Finger Lake Racetrack Steward, State Steward Stuart Rainey, Finger Lakes Racing Association Steward Richard Coyne, and Jockey Club Steward Don Combs. We also discussed guidelines and protocols that would be needed to be in place and would also welcome expanding this process to the harness tracks over time that would require the development of a uniform and consistent policy
for all stewards and presiding judges to follow. We also plan on meeting with the Racing Fan Advisory Council and solicit their input on both our overall discussion and the results of our canvassing and research. To that end, the Commission will ask the New York Racing Fan Advisory Council for their thoughts on how best to achieve these goals. It is our expectation that we will begin with the thoroughbred tracks reporting and should be prepared to report back to the Commission with a policy directive by the end of July. Hopefully, as previously stated, this reporting will be expanded to the harness track once the thoroughbred component is in place. Thank you.
Commissioner Crotty, any?
It sounds very complete. I think that'd be excellent. Any one of those would be great. So, great job, Ron. Great job, Rob. I think that would be a very meaningful improvement.
Thank you.
Secondly, just to report back to the full Commission, April 9th in Albany, we had a very productive forum on the issue of problem gambling. I recall in my first Commission meeting, I suggested that we take a look at this issue because of the impact it will have in New York State, what was known, and two of the Commissioners joined us for that. I thank you both for being there, and we had a really distinguished group of witnesses, researchers, public service providers, individuals, families impacted, the industry itself. It was really a very meaningful full day of work. So I think we may want to get a little update of where we're going from there. I don't know if Rob or...
Yeah, certainly. At this point, I'd like to Ed Burns to address it. He's been working with his staff related to some regulations. Ed?
Sure. As the commissioners who were there in Albany know, there was a wealth of useful information submitted in connection with the public hearing, and we are analyzing all of that and studying it very carefully in the context of developing the Commission's proposed comprehensive regulations of the casinos that will start in New York State, and are integrating that information into the drafts that we'll develop for your consideration.
What would your timing be on that? How do you see that?
I think probably sometime this summer we'll, be circulating a draft of what the comprehensive state regulations might look like.
Right.
As a preliminary to that, we're going to get out a white paper on regulatory.
Preliminary, yeah, very, very shortly, we are going to come out with some guidance of the what the regulations might look like in outline form, and some of the areas in which other jurisdictions might differ, and what the range of theories in which states regulate certain aspects of the casino industry. And we're pulling all that together for you now, and should have that to you very shortly.
Ed, will you be able to time that so that it interlaces reasonably with what the location board is doing? Because they have a component of their application that goes to this issue, and I don't want to be in a situation where we've suddenly done much of rulemaking after the fact.
Yeah, where we would circulate to both you and the facility board what Rob refers to as a white paper of kind of giving you the scope or outline of what proposed regulations might look like, and what some of the decision points you're going to have to consider are going to be, and get some feedback from all of you so we can give some guidance to the potential casino applicants before
My only observation is, if I took my notes correctly, the apps are due on June 30.
Correct.
The preliminary apps, I want to make sure that's foremost in our timing.
It absolutely is.
Okay.
So it would be sent up in a way for...
Yes.
Well, the fact we had the hearing, I suppose, also indicates to anyone. It did not come up in any of the questions from any of the applications.
Are we involving Oasis in this process?
I haven't been in touch with them, but certainly, they could have valuable input into it.
We are on the Responsible Play Partnership, which is a different component of the responsible gambling elements that we're advancing. They're one of the three major players in that Responsible Play Partnership.
I just raised that if we're doing things that they're not aware of, that's when they start hearing things. That's okay.
Well, and in that regard, I thank Rob and the entire staff. You suggested in February, by April 9th, it was a very distinguished panel, and I think a treasure trove of information for us to unpack. So, thank you.
It was really amazing. You were able to put that together in
Yes,
such a short
right.
period of time.
Absolutely. Yeah. The next item on our agenda is scheduling of our next meetings. I've had conversations with Rob in this regard. I guess my recommendation is that we establish a uniform date rather than trying to coordinate everyone's calendar. I think it's burdensome to the staff and not necessary. So I would suggest we just pick perhaps the fourth Monday of each month and proceed with that kind of calendaring. If the agenda is not fulsome enough, we can suspend the meeting, but if we get it on everyone's calendars, we would all know, the commission staff would know, and I think would be in better shape going forward. But I'm open to any other revisions of dates or times that would be.
You know, John, you and I had hesitation about that only because we were worried about a quorum. Now that we're 5, I think we have a better shot at it.
Yeah, right, sure.
So any day we pick is fine with me.
And this seems to be the best location for it.
I mean, we could rotate it around if it mattered. I don't really care.
I don't know if it matters, it's...
Yeah.
Telecock was saying worked from Geneva, so that was everybody. It's nice to see you all.
You weren't proposing meetings in Geneva, were you?
We should go up in the summertime. It's absolutely beautiful. Go to fall.
Exactly.
We're there in the dead of winter. It wasn't half bad.
Not Switzerland,
Yeah.
New York.
So if that date,
There's only one Switzerland in there.
but the notion of that regular calendaring, I think, makes the most sense for planning purposes for everyone. Okay, so we will.
Now, of course, your first Monday or your last Monday of June is the week of 4th of July.
Oh.
It's maybe the week before.
We'll play around with
Yeah,
it. At
yeah,
least
yeah.
it's a scheduling, so that way
Listen,
we
I
can put
think
it on the
so.
calendar
It's a
and make
stake
adjustments.
in the ground.
Even
It's
if
taking the ground, fair enough.
right, and some may. Fair enough point. There may be holidays or events that will interrupt that.
But locking in November's date or having it tentatively out there would be very helpful.
Yeah, I would even say for the balance of the calendar.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Then
Put
we
it out.
can revisit it and see where we're. Okay, so I think that concludes today's published agenda. Do any of the commissioners have any other additional items they would like to present for consideration here? Well, hearing
This
none.
means that we do meet again before the applications come in at the end of June.
Yes, it would
correct? Okay, good.
But not necessarily the fourth Monday in June.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. We will adjourn this meeting of the New York State Gaming Commission. We welcome our new colleague, Peter, to the table. I thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thanks.